How to make yourself do the hardest things daily. Lotus Method. Have you ever found yourself staring at a task you know could change your life, and yet some part of you, the part that always whispers later, wins again? Maybe it's the gym bag gathering dust in the corner. Maybe it's that call you never make, the book you never read, or the dream you never chase. We all have these moments. And ironically, they're not because we're lazy or weak, they're because we're human. But what if I told you that the most powerful way to become the kind of person who does the hardest things daily isn't through force, willpower, or motivation, but through something ancient, almost sacred? That's what I call the Lotus Method. And no, it's not about sitting in a perfect meditation pose until the universe gives you permission. It's about understanding why we resist the hard things and how to dissolve that resistance at its root, not through pressure, but through clarity, through philosophy, through an approach that aligns with the deepest truths of human nature. Let me warn you, what we're about to explore isn't a quick-fix productivity hack. This is war. A quiet, internal war. A war between the version of you that wants comfort and the version of you that wants evolution. The Lotus Method is named after the flower that grows out of the mud, not despite it, but because of it. The mud is not the enemy. The mud is the material. The very thing that seems to hold us back, our fear, our doubt, our habits, is also the stuff we must understand and work with to rise. So let's start by asking the question, why is it so hard to do the things we know are good for us?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
The answer is more profound than we don't feel like it. We live in a world that has trained us to chase immediate returns. We open our phones, we get a dopamine hit. We do something hard, we feel nothing at first. The brain, in its evolutionary brilliance, is wired for survival, not fulfillment. It wants safety, predictability, and energy conservation. So every time you try to do something hard, even if you consciously know it's good, your unconscious wiring screams sabotage. You feel tired. You procrastinate. But what if I told you that every time you ignore that resistance and act anyway, you are not just doing a task, you are literally reprogramming your identity? Here's where the Lotus Method begins, with the truth that identity is not fixed, it's sculpted by repetition. You are not a static being. You are a pattern, a looping narrative. Every action you take is a vote for the kind of person you believe you are. So when you do something hard, even once, you are not just completing a task. You are casting a vote for the version of yourself that does hard things. Do this enough times, and your identity shifts. You no longer try to do hard things. You are the person who does them. And once your identity aligns with the action, the resistance fades. But you must be patient, because the first stage of the lotus is not beauty, it's mud. Imagine now you wake up tomorrow and you feel that old familiar resistance. The bed is warm. The goal is far away. The voice of comfort whispers again. At that moment you have a choice. Do you obey the voice, or do you observe it? The Lotus Method teaches us to observe before we act. Observation creates distance. It turns the whisper into an object, not a command. You are not the voice that resists, you are the awareness that hears it. This is the first power, detachment. Detachment is not apathy. It's clarity. It's the ability to see your internal resistance not as truth, but as a passing cloud. I think of it like this: the mind is a sky, and every thought is weather. Some days are storms, some are blue. But the sky is not the storm. You are not your thoughts. And the moment you realize this, you gain leverage. You can act independently of your emotions. You can choose the hard thing, even when it feels unnatural. And that is the beginning of true freedom. But detachment alone is not enough. You need a reason, a why that's so emotionally compelling that it dwarfs the discomfort of the task. And this too is part of the Lotus Method. You do not just act, you connect. You connect the task to your future self, to the person you are becoming. Every hard thing you avoid is a gift wrapped in pain. Open it and you find growth. Avoid it and you remain stagnant. So ask yourself, who suffers if I don't change? What is the cost of avoiding the hard thing not just today, but over the next 10 years? What would your life look like if you did the hard thing every single day, starting now? We must stop thinking of hard things as punishments. They are initiations. They are invitations to rise. And the more resistance you feel, the more meaningful the task likely is. The pain of doing it is the price of transformation. No one ascends by accident. You must choose it. Daily, willingly, even joyfully. Because the hard thing is not the enemy. It's the doorway. And the resistance is the guardian that tests your readiness. Most people run from the door forever. But you, if you're still listening, you're not most people. Now, here's a question to sit with before we continue. If the hard thing you've been avoiding holds the key to your future self, why do you keep giving the key away? Becoming the guardian of your own becoming. How to train the muscle of daily discipline. Let's go deeper. The idea of doing hard things every day sounds glorious in theory, but in practice, it's messy, full of failure, emotional fatigue, and inner rebellion. The Lotus Method recognizes this. It doesn't expect perfection, it demands presence. And presence is not something you stumble into. It's trained. Just as muscles grow under resistance, so does discipline. But here's the twist. Discipline is not something you apply to your external world first. It's something you cultivate internally, like a flame. You become the guardian of your own becoming, not by forcing yourself to act, but by learning to listen to the deeper layers of your resistance. What is it trying to protect you from? What story is it replaying? And most importantly, is that story still true? We often believe that if we just had more willpower, we'd be unstoppable. But willpower is a finite resource. It's like a battery that depletes with every decision. That's why some days you can crush a morning workout and still cave in to junk food by evening. Discipline, however, is different. It's not about force, it's about structure. It's the scaffolding that shapes your energy, attention, and identity. If you want to do hard things daily, you don't need more motivation, you need better architecture. That means designing your life in a way that makes the hard thing easier to start. Not easy to do, easier to begin. Because once you start, momentum takes over. Action creates clarity. It cuts through the fog of hesitation. Now think about this. When a sculptor begins with a block of marble, they don't wait to feel inspired. They chip. They carve. They trust that the form will reveal itself through the act. Your life is the same. The version of you that does the hardest things is hidden beneath layers of I can't, I'm tired, and maybe later. But every time you act, every time you chip away at the block, you get closer to revealing the masterpiece. The Lotus Method is not about waiting for ideal conditions. It's about becoming the kind of person who creates ideal conditions through consistency. Now here's where the method becomes uniquely transformational. It asks you to ritualize your resistance. That means rather than waiting for resistance to surprise you, you invite it, you expect it. You build your day around the knowledge that the hard thing will feel hard, and you create rituals to meet it with awareness instead of avoidance. For example, if you know that writing, working out, or studying is your hardest task, make it the first thing you honor in your day. Not because it's easy, but because it's sacred. The first hour of your day is your declaration to the universe of who you believe you are. If you roll over and check your phone, you're saying, I am a reactor. If you rise and meet your ritual, you're saying, I am the sculptor of my becoming. That identity shift, repeated daily, becomes your foundation. And it doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, expecting perfection is the fastest way to quit. The Lotus Method embraces imperfection because mud is messy. Some days you'll stumble. Some days you'll skip, but you always return. Discipline doesn't mean never failing. It means always returning. Think of it like tending a fire. Miss a day and the flame dims. Miss 2 and it flickers. But return just once, even for 5 minutes, and you feed the flame again. Over time, that fire becomes your identity. You no longer rely on motivation because you've become the kind of person who honors the ritual, no matter how you feel. Here's something you probably haven't considered. The hardest thing you do daily is actually the most honest part of your day, because it's the moment when your values, your fears, and your identity all collide. Do you value growth more than comfort? Do you fear failure more than stagnation? Who wins in that moment reveals who you truly are, not who you wish you were. But this is not a judgment. It's an invitation. Every hard thing you face is a mirror, not to punish you, to show you, to reflect the parts of you that are still waiting to evolve. And when you respond with courage, even in a small way, you shift the reflection. You become more whole. So, let's ground this in a question: what small, sacred ritual could you commit to every day, not to achieve a goal, but to become the person who moves toward the goal, no matter what? The emphasis is not on performance, it's on alignment. You don't have to do it perfectly. You just have to do it on purpose. And that purpose must be rooted in something deeper than ego. It must bloom from the soil of meaning. Why does this hard thing matter thing? What does it represent? Who will you become on the other side of it? Because here's the truth. The hardest things in your life are not obstacles. They are oracles. They speak the language of your transformation, but only if you're willing to listen and act. The sacred tension, why resistance is a sign you're on the right path. We often misunderstand resistance. We treat it like a warning, a signal to turn back. But what if resistance isn't a threat? What if it's a compass? What if it's the universe's way of pointing directly at the work that matters most? In the Lotus Method, resistance is not your enemy. It's your invitation. It's the sacred tension that shows up whenever you stand at the edge of your current self and dare to step into your next one. And that discomfort you feel, that's not weakness. It's the friction of transformation. You're not breaking down, you're breaking open. Consider this: every meaningful thing you've ever done was preceded by resistance. The first time you tried to speak your truth. The first time you dared to love someone deeply. The first time you attempted something far beyond your comfort zone. The fear, the hesitation, the self-doubt, they weren't signs you were doing the wrong thing. They were signs you were touching something real. So why do we flee from resistance when it arrives each day? Because we confuse it with danger. But in truth, the greatest danger is not the discomfort of trying. It's the slow decay of never trying at all. The Lotus Method teaches us to reframe the tension not as pain but as proof. Proof that we are alive. That we care. That we're not sleepwalking through life. Resistance only appears when you're engaging with something that matters. The meaningless tasks. They don't provoke resistance. They pass through you like water. But the meaningful ones, the ones that ask something of you, they summon every shadow. Why? Because they have the power to change you. And change, even when it's beautiful, is terrifying. So instead of asking, how do I eliminate resistance? We must ask, how do I dance with it? I think of resistance like gravity. It pulls on everything that tries to rise, not to destroy it, but to test its sincerity. No flower blooms without first pushing through the soil. No bird soars without first fighting the weight of earth. So too with our discipline. The harder the pull, the more sacred the path. The Lotus Method asks us to lean in, to stop waiting for ease and start preparing for effort, but not effort as punishment, effort as prayer, as presence, as devotion to the growth that only hardship can unlock. And here's a crucial insight: resistance often masks itself as logic. It will say you're too tired, you don't have time, you're not ready. But if you listen closely, you'll notice something strange. Those thoughts show up every time you approach your edge. It's not about truth. It's about safety. Your mind is trying to conserve energy, to stay predictable. And that's understandable. It's trying to protect you. But growth and safety have never lived in the same house. If you want to become someone you've never been, you will have to do things you've never done and feel things you've never wanted to feel. And that's okay. That's the price of becoming. Now, let me ask you something radical. What if the resistance you feel is not a signal to stop, but a signal to pay attention? What if it's not a door closing, but a door you've never tried to open because you assumed it was locked? The Lotus Method encourages you to touch that door daily. Not to knock timidly, but to press your hand against it and feel its texture. To get familiar with the discomfort. Because eventually, and this is the great secret, discomfort becomes your ally. It becomes the proof that you are no longer asleep in your life. You are awake. You are choosing. You are alive. When you begin to see resistance this way, everything changes. The hard thing doesn't feel like a burden. It feels like a signal. A flare saying, here, right here. This is the edge. And the edge is where life happens. Not in the center of comfort, but at the boundary of what you thought was possible. So do the hard thing not despite the resistance, but because of it. That's where the real you lives, just beyond the resistance, waiting to be met. Becoming the bloom. How to sustain the practice of doing hard things for a lifetime. So here we are, the final movement. We've journeyed through the mud of resistance, the roots of identity, the fire of daily tests, and now we arrive at the bloom. But the bloom is not an end. It's a beginning. The person who does hard things daily is not someone who arrived at a destination. They are someone who learned how to live in a certain way, a way that honors challenge, a way that doesn't run from difficulty, but absorbs it, metabolizes it, and grows from it. The bloom is a state of being, not a status. And to live in that state consistently, we must build a philosophy, not just a routine. The Lotus Method is not about rising once. It is about rising again and again. And to do that, you need more than just a reason. You need rhythm. Rhythm is stronger than resolve. It's what carries you when motivation dies, when your mind is clouded and your heart is heavy. Rhythm is the beat of your becoming. And the only way to create rhythm is through repetition. That's why the lotus blooms slowly over seasons, not seconds. And so must you. There is no grand finale. There's only the daily act of showing up for the hard thing over and over until it becomes who you are. But let's be honest, sustaining this path is hard. Life will try to pull you away. People will not understand. Your own mind will tempt you to quit. And yet in those moments you must remember this. The hardest path is not the one with the most effort. It's the one with no direction, no clarity, no meaning. The path of comfort is seductive, but it's empty. It fills your days and hollows your soul. The path of discipline, of daily difficulty, is not a punishment. It is a pilgrimage, a sacred return to your truest self. To sustain this, you must fall in love with effort, not because it feels good, but because it reveals you to yourself. Every time you do the hard thing, you peel away another layer of falsehood. You become more honest, more courageous, more awake. You begin to trust yourself in a way most people never do. That trust is not built through success, it's built through consistency. Through showing up even when you don't feel like it, especially then. Because when you act without feeling ready, you prove to yourself that you are not your moods. You are your choices. And let's talk about one last thing: legacy. What kind of life are you building? Not in 10 years, but in this moment, right now, by the actions you choose. Do you want to be remembered as someone who always waited for the right time? or as someone who made the time right by acting. Every day is a brick. Every hard thing you do is a stone placed in the foundation of the life you are building. That life is not built in grand gestures. It's built in the quiet, invisible, uncelebrated moments when you choose growth over ease. That's the bloom. That's the lotus. So now, the final question. What would your life look like if you honored the hard thing every single day, not out of fear of failure, but out of love for who you are becoming? This is the invitation, to rise from the mud again and again, to treat discomfort not as a warning, but as a whisper from the future calling you forward, to become the kind of person who does the hardest things not because it's easy, not because it's trendy, but because it's true, because it's the only way to become whole. And when you do that not once but daily, patiently, quietly, relentlessly, you don't just change your habits, you change your life. That is the Lotus Method. Now go bloom.